Welcome to Journey Through the Assure Lesson Plan by Tammy Weiss. The first step in the Assure Lesson Plan is A. Analyze learners. The Journey to the Land of Copyright lesson was designed for 6th graders in Mrs. Stewart's class. The age of the students is one of the learner characteristics, which is an important part of this step. The population of Mrs. Stewart's class was also considered, and it is diverse in culture and learning styles, as well as having differently abled and gifted students. I mentioned in the lesson that a pre-test was given. Mrs. Stewart had the students fill out a Google form the previous week, and it told us they have not learned this information before. It was an important piece of information because it told us where the learners are at in advance. I had in mind that I would need to incorporate audio and visual presentations to help reach multiple learning styles. I would need to consider ways to differentiate learning for all academic abilities, which I'll address in the S-Select Resources step in a little bit. S. State objectives. Because our school is a private school, they have not chosen to use standards-based teaching or grading, so I simply called this section State Objectives. I clearly formulated the learning objectives and shared them with the students at the beginning of the lesson so that they also knew what was expected. The objective or goal: by the end of this lesson, you will be able to define copyright, define public domain, define fair use, list the 4 factors of fair use, describe how copyright applies to you. S. Select strategies and resources. Copyright is not clear-cut, which makes it challenging to teach, so I looked through many resources as I made my lesson plan. I did not use the videos and exact teaching of Common Sense Education in my lesson, but I used their lessons to help me figure out what was an age-appropriate expectations. That helped me form my lesson objectives. Their definitions were the best that I could find that would make sense to this particular age group, so I used those definitions in my original slides and gave credit at the bottom. It was a form of modification that I was using. I also thought through educational tools that I know of that would help the learning be more engaging for the students, including using Canvas slides and choosing the theme of journey. I then created the slides and used the informational resources to help teach the objectives. Hopefully, the slides and continued journey theme are helping to engage you more in this instructor-directed section as well. Utilize materials. I gathered together everything I needed and got to work as I prepared the resources. It would also be helpful for me to test running the slideshow in advance in the room that I'm going to be presenting in. Also, any other technology I'm using, such as Kahoot and the Google Forms, need to be tested in advance to check for accuracy and function. Sharing the objectives with the learners at the beginning of the lesson was key in preparing the learners. Then it comes time to dig in and present the lesson using what I prepared. R. Require learner response. The learners will be participating in a Kahoot as a table group, which would help them practice and remind them of what they learned. What they answered correctly and incorrectly on the Kahoot would give the learners feedback. After a brain break, a Google form and accompanying rubric would serve as a post-test and provide feedback as to whether they met the objectives or not. Keeping in mind differently abled learners, audio would be added to the questions in the Google form. And the final step is E. Evaluation. The final Google form and rubric would be used as the system evaluation for this copyright lesson. I would need to pay special attention to the wording of my questions in the Google form and the Kahoot to ensure that they were testing knowledge of these stated objectives and not something else, such as who painted the Mona Lisa. At least one free response question would be included to assess the objective of how copyright is applicable to the student. The rubric would help guide me as to whether the students met the objectives or not for the lesson. Based on the scores students achieved on the rubric, I would revise strategies and resources if overall there were areas the students did not score well or did not seem to have learned the concepts. Now, on the other hand, if the students, seem to overall score really well, then I can know that my lesson was successful and use it again in future years. Here is the rubric that I created to assess this lesson. You can see the 5 different main objectives and a grading system of 4321, which I know is generally what is used in standards-based grading. So I worded that way, even though that is not what my current school uses. I've used that in the past. So I have a basic understanding of that. I included it here in this video, but I also, I just took a screenshot of this and included it on the Word document as well as requested. And here are my references, which are the ones that I used for the student lesson plan. I went ahead and just included those here as well. Thanks so much.